right, here we go, ladies. Another day, another podcast. Today, we're talking about vulnerability. Leadership and motherhood is the theme for this week. I've been really enjoying the conversation and the comments that you guys are sending me on Instagram. So head on over there at Mamas in Control and let me know. What are your thoughts? What are your feedback? What else do you want me to talk about? This week is all about leadership and motherhood. I'm going to be talking more about parenting this month because that's my jam and I absolutely love it when we're really trying to understand our children and realize that, you know, this isn't unique, just like marriage or friendships or the relationships that we have with our own parents or extended family. Parenting is just simply a relationship. And so when we're trying to navigate that and we truly understand that, we can use those skills and strategies to kind of transform other areas of our life. And today I found a quote by my favorite, Brene Brown. If you are not familiar with Brene Brown's work, I believe you should be at this point because I talk about her a lot. Author of many, many books, but Daring Greatly is a great one. One of my favorites that she just launched is called Dare to Lead. Her last name is spelt, or her name is spelt Brene Brown, B-R-E-N-E, Brene Brown, B-R-O-W-N. She's a social worker, a researcher. She talks about shame and vulnerability. So I wanted to define shame for you. She says define vulnerability for you. Vulnerability is the birthplace for love and connection. This is how Brene defines vulnerability. When I actually Googled vulnerability define, like the definition of vulnerability, what came up was all these stories of people talking about vulnerable populations. But I'm like, what is the actual definition? And of course, Brene always says this is her definition, right, of all the research that she's done, that in the birthplace of vulnerability, that is where love and connection occur. So what does this have to do with motherhood? What does this have to do with leadership? Well, I'll tell you. This is a quote by Brene as well. If you don't understand vulnerability, you cannot manage and lead people. If you're not showing up vulnerably as a leader, you cannot expect anyone else to follow you, period. Interesting. Yesterday, the day before, I've talked about this over and over and over again about the fact that parenting is just a leadership role. And we are shifting into this new paradigm of leadership, which is about daring leadership and vulnerability. Us, humans, adults, seeing our children for who they are and what is going on and not being triggered by their big emotions. So oftentimes what happens is we're just taking everyone's emotional reactions personally, and we're in constant reactivity mode in our life. And when we're in constant reactivity mode, what's happening is we're exhausted, right? You're going through your day thinking like, I just want to be in a bubble. You're waking up, the kids are being kids, you know, your partner's doing whatever they're doing, you're getting in the car, you're interacting with the world, you're going to work, or you're doing whatever you do all day. And by the end of the day, you're just like, what the heck happened? You know, people just puked their stuff all over me, and I just kind of reacted to them. Vulnerability, leading with vulnerability, is when you truly see the other person as what they are, their emotional state of being. Their way of being in the world has nothing to do with you. Like, you're just observing this person. And yes, they may be reacting off of you and how you're showing up, but realizing that that person is just expressing themselves. They're telling you something from their emotion and their behavior. So what I often find when I'm working with people in parenting is we're working on vulnerability. Because if you do not understand vulnerability, you cannot manage and lead people. Think about it. You're a leader. You're raising children. That automatically qualifies you as a leader. You are in a leadership role and in your job. Think about on a daily basis how many conflicts you come into contact with and how much drama you see around you. If you do not see and understand drama and see and understand emotion and vulnerability, you will burn out very rapidly in your role, whether that's in parenting or in your work, in your career. So when you understand vulnerability and you see that people are just afraid, people are just having a reaction, they're feeling resistance, then when you begin to understand that, you can manage and lead them better. You can coach them and say, hey, I see you're struggling. What do you need? You can just sit and listen. But how can we lead other people in vulnerability if we're not showing up vulnerable ourselves? We can't expect anyone else to do it if we're not willing to do it ourselves, right? So that's what Brene is saying. This brought me back to thinking about parenting in general. Think about how you were parented and what that generation was taught, right? Think about, I'm curious what my children are going to think of me and go, oh, Mom, remember when you used to talk about all that weird stuff? And, this is just like common knowledge to them now. I'm just so curious of what the next generation is going to look like and how they're going to parent and how the pendulum is going to swing. Because I don't ever remember my parents once apologizing for their behavior. Never once. I never remember them screaming or yelling or reacting and then saying, I'm really sorry that I just did that. That was uncalled for on my behalf. How often? That's vulnerability. How often do you remember hearing that as a child? I'm sorry. How often? More importantly, how often do you do that now? When you catch yourself maybe rushing or reacting, do you ever stop and look at your children and say, I don't know what monster just came out 30 minutes ago. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. And that's it. You don't expect an apology from your child. You just take personal responsibility for your action. This is where the magic happens, in the space of vulnerability. So today is all about seeing vulnerability as a strength. It's not a weakness. That's the old paradigm thinking, that vulnerability means you're weak and you need to look strong and you need to be no emotion. There is magic in vulnerability. That's it. That's all I got for you today. Magic and vulnerability. Be vulnerable. Say you're sorry. Push send on that email. Have an uncomfortable conversation. Do things that make you want to vomit and shit your pants at the same time. Just go for it. That's your goal for today. Be vulnerable.